speak on the subject that I feel very passionate about. And my name is Jino Ryu from University of California, Berkeley. I would like to start my talk with a question. Who here uses internet to get in touch with other people? I would like to see some hands up. Anybody? Emails, Facebook, Google? Most people. So as you can see from those around you, internet brings people together. It compresses the distance between people with similar identities or interests who may live across a country or even the world. For people with minoritized identities, such as that of transgender, online spaces function as a community in which those people share their interests and thereby cultivate interpersonal connections and solidarity. Today, I'm presenting my research on how young trans Koreans, mainly FTM transgender populations, foster a positive self-identity online using blogs. I'll first provide some particularities of South Korea as context for this research, including its internet use, its history as to transgender community building, and Naver, the web portal. Thereafter is an introduction to my research and the research results divided into 3 sections, and I'll end my talk with a reflection. Is the paper circulating? Okay. Before I jump into context, I'd like to let you know that there will be some slides that I will not cover as thoroughly as I would want to due to time constraint. However, every single slide is printed in the index. So context. Located between China and Japan, South Korea does deserve the title of the internet, the country of the internet. It has the world's fastest internet connection speed and the most available Wi-Fi locations. It's fascinating given that South Korea is only 20% larger than in its land mass size in comparison to Austria. Just for another comparison, South Korea is only 1/100th the size of mainland China. South Korea's online prevalence is also very noticeable, nearly 100% for an age group between 10 to 40. It is important to keep in mind also that the capital city of South Korea, Seoul, is densely populated. This adds to the anxiety of trans people living in Seoul toward potentially being identified offline based on their online information. Speaking of trans Koreans being online, let's turn to the history of online trans community building in South Korea. The popularization of internet in the 1990s gave rise to online transgender communities in South Korea. Initially, people created a small subgroup within the large online space that catered to people with a variety of interests and identities. Then in the early 2000s, transgender people came up with their own individual domains that they had to pay for to organize a trans-dedicated online space. The structures and the operational mechanisms of those online spaces in early 2000s were very analogous to those of what they call cafe on Naver, to which many older trans Korean people migrated. The staff members no longer had to pay for the individual domains and could organize the community much easily. The same domain Naver, starting in 2010, saw the surge in blogs run by young transgender populations, particularly those who identify as female to male transgender. And I keep mentioning this Naver thing, so what is it? Naver is the most popular Korean web search portal / search engine, and it is as functional and popular as Google and Yahoo combined. In addition to its email and search engine services, Naver enables its users to use the Naver domain to establish 2 types of independent online communities, namely blog and cafe. And this is a page that would show up when I sign in. Blog and cafe share a very identical web design. However, they differ in management, participation method, and differential visibility. And my research identifies these functional differences to answer why young trans Koreans prefer blog over cafe. Introduction. So I wanted to investigate how young trans Koreans use Naver blog to collectively foster positive self-identity and yet consult Anglo-centric social networking system or social media in the lack of open transition information written in Korean. These informations are in fact available in the cafe, in neighbor cafe run hidden and often dominated by older trans Koreans who already are in medical transition. My research was qualitative and cross-sectional in its nature. I uploaded a Google survey form on my own blog for 2 months up to last Christmas. I received 57 submissions in total. I began my own blog about 3 years ago when I came out as trans. At the time, I was living in China. In early 2013, I started uploading videos, and soon my blog became really popular. It is by far the most visited trans blog on Naver. I organized the questionnaires into 11 questions, categorized into 3 themes. Other than personal information, every question was answered in long text. So I posted on my blog the first photo that asks for, hey, can you come to this Google survey thing? I would love to get your answers. And the lower photo would be the introduction to my research. And I collected some personal information. And after then, participants would fill out 11 questions, and those were some examples. Google thankfully auto-generated for me this beautiful spreadsheet based on their answers. Yes. In regards to participants' information, both mean and median age were 20, meaning they're relatively young. As the title of my research hinted, nearly 3/4 of the participants answered that they identify along the lines of FDM, trans man, or simply a man. The rest includes genderqueer, androgyne, bigender, and some other identities. Only 1/4 of participants said that they are read as the gender that they prefer or identify with. This might be relevant to the fact that not so many of them have gone through physical, surgical medical transition that significantly changes the way they appear to be, gendered way, and also the way the world genders them. Yet it is noticeable that most of them have come out to either their parents and or their friends. So the first section of my research results focus on the use of blog by young trans Koreans. I've listed some general features of a blog. I could talk about some details if anybody have a question during the Q&A section. And also how the blog enables communication with comments. This is the interesting part. Not all posts are available for public view. A blogger may set each post available for anyone, meaning the public, or for none by oneself, or available just for whom one selects as neighbor or mutual neighbor. The higher the status, the more access one has to the other bloggers' posts. This selective readership is crucial because it serves as a basis for a deeper interpersonal connection between the bloggers. For example, this neighbor feature brings, for trans population, this neighbor feature brings tremendous benefits. For example, one could indicate that one is trans on the post for public view and record daily trans experiences. For example, I met another cis person today, blah, blah, blah. This will continuously bring new people in, the prospective neighbors, who would look up the keywords such as trans or FDM on Naver search engine. In the meantime, the blogger can talk about one's medical information that is often considered more private or taboo in South Korean society, only with one's trusted neighbors who share the similar identities, i.e. transgender. Now, let's turn to how young trans folks find blog in their own terms. For many, blog is a space where they express what they would call as their true persona that is often repressed in reality. They do not have to censor how they truly feel, so they can use gender pronouns that they prefer with other people who would also like to be addressed in such a manner. At the same time, bloggers often talk of loneliness or their struggles with their gender dysphoria or encounterment with their parents, that they cannot often talk with their friends in reality in the fear of being outed. Consequently, I think blog is a highly performative space, meaning the repeated declaration of one's alienation or solitude from the body and the society, which are attributed to their transgender identity, creates the seemingly inherent negativity of transgender lives in contrast to cisgender lives. Yet, I would not negate the agency of the bloggers, because acknowledging one's need of emotional solidarity or the expression of pain, which are so often deemed effeminate or unmanly that I cannot understand, those acknowledgements are still a huge step forward to intra-group support. Blog thus captures a growth trajectory of one's emotions, just like a diary. Participants use blog in a very practical manner. They definitely wanted to make some more friends, a lot of focus on medical social information too. Some wanted to learn about Korean queer issues, while others wanted to learn about gender identities and expressions so that they could validate their daily experiences and self-definitions. Lastly, I asked what they learned or earned from blogging. Those who entered cyberspace with a bit of hesitation found one's community. Those who entered cyberspace with a bit of hesitation came out with a bit of psychological stability and also queer pride. As bloggers read about how others take their journey, they learned about not only medical information, but also unexpected challenges and difficulties that lie ahead even after medical transition. The most positive answer was an experience of vicarious pleasure as they support one another's transition, both spiritual and physical. For those who already started medical transition, they could keep themselves humble as they reminded themselves how far they have come from the moment of realization that they are trans to now being read as a man they are. Cafe, or Kape in Korean, is the other online community Naver supports with its domain. This community happens to be dominated by the older FDM population. Most of them are currently in medical transition and often read as a cisgender male-bodied person full-time. Cafe is a community based on participatory membership. So you could think blog as a WordPress blog, while Cafe would be a typical online community. Consequently, Cafe archives far more medical information written in Korean than any single blog. Members would compare and contrast their surgery results. They would also rank hospitals based on their own interactions with the doctors. But not so many young trans population are interested in being part of this community. Before we see why it is so, here is a variety of administration options Naver Cafe offers and how a membership hierarchy functions. Once registered, a member from a low rank would work up to a higher rank in which one could access more information. The staff member decides how many ranks there are and the requirements for initial registration and promotion to a higher rank. So why do young trans population prefer blog over Cafe when Cafe has far more to offer? The most popular answer is that they couldn't find one because cafes often remain hidden. This means one can only register in a cafe by staff invitation. This then indicates one already has to know the manager or other staff members personally. In the lack of intergenerational communication, there's slim chance for a young transgender population to know them at all. Those who were fortunate enough to be invited or find a cafe that is open, they were often overwhelmed by the culture of what I call as transition hazing. This comprises of several aspects. For example, cafes' overemphasis on physical changes result in a very hyper-masculine environment in which one cannot openly talk about their emotional distress or one's change in sexuality. For example, previously identifying as straight man and after testosterone or something, starting to identify as non-heterosexual or gay. Older members would often be condescending to younger members who have not been able to afford medical transition, diminishing others' sense of masculinity or manhood based on the surgical medical status. Other participants felt very uncomfortable having to provide personal information that would be held as a hostage. This was to prevent the newly admitted members potentially leaking medical information in the cafe to the public. One is then often asked to provide combination of information such as name assigned at birth, national ID that indicates the sex assigned at birth in a form of 1 or 2, and age, voice recordings, sometimes they call you, home address, and even a face photo. As described, many young transgender people found cafe a largely problematic space, yet that doesn't mean a blog is a fully safe one. Although most people do identify the popularization of blog as a very positive and necessary step, and it also has a large potential to educate non-queer people on queer issues, but people also did have some genuine worries. First and foremost, there was a large concern about queerphobic people potentially identifying them using transition information posted on blog as a detective tool. They were also worried about the politics of representation, namely the few trans people representing the whole. The most unexpected, yet nonetheless popular concern was the influence of romanticized queer images in the media and in other texts such as fan fictions. People were worried that such information would influence the kids who cannot make a logical conclusion as to their own bodies and identities. And in the meantime, those readily available sources on blog wouldn't give young people enough time to consider their identities before they impulsively begin their medical transition, which might lead to regret. Given the possibility of being identified offline, there exists a large number of trans population, especially after legal gender change, who leave online communities, whether it be blog or cafe. Those left behind mourn this digital life funeral, which involves a thorough removal of comments, posts, or any other thing that would serve as an evidence of a being transgender previously. This page represents those who understand and intend to go through digital life funeral. They said that they do not blame those who leave when there's an utter lack of social protection of transgender people. Besides, it's simply not polite to beg others post-transition to stay amongst themselves just so that one can benefit from their knowledge. It would be too much to ask for a person who already tasted the sweetness of cis-looking or cis-privilege to live amidst those who would remind the painful past. Consequently, those on this page believe that digging out of information on one's own is a necessary part of transition or becoming a man. Not everybody agrees with that point. Other people have expressed that they do not want others and themselves to delete blogs, or throughout or after transition. Some also intend to come out or even serve as a mentor for the next generation of trans population, so that those who cannot find a reliable source of information being blocked from cafe older trans population could proceed with their transition. People on this page believed that there has to be a group of people visible in constant manner to alter the society's perception of transgender people, from pathological monsters to people who lead their lives true to themselves. Unfortunately, as of now, there's a lack of Korean role model young trans Koreans could follow. So the different perspectives toward digital life funeral within young trans Koreans and intergenerational conflict taking place in the cafe direct both age groups of people to look for transition information from Anglo-centric online spaces. And from these top 5 social media or networking systems the participants chose, I infer that people are most attracted to the information that could be understood visually, even if one does not speak English, which is the dominant language in all 5 spaces. Indeed, people were searching these keywords that center around medical transitions such as top or bottom surgery, rather than social or emotional experiences that take place after physical changes kick in. This is understandable because not everyone understands English so well. Not everyone can grasp the description of emotional change in a foreign language, which is difficult to describe to begin with. So when they did see East Asian transition materials, they would get excited because they see themselves in those videos. However, most people still could not understand the content fully because even East Asians, including Koreans, would upload videos in English. A lot of people pointed out that using English in the videos is to protect themselves from being identified by the same ethnic group. Participants stated that this attests to the conservatism of Asian culture in comparison to the Western one, which is liberal. People were most upset that East Asians do not get the satisfactory medical results that white trans men seem to get from hormonal transitions. Indeed, most participants were very envious of dramatic physical changes, such as beard growth, muscle mass increase, voice deepening, all that quote-unquote good stuff. This would leave many people with a sense of relative deprivation and frustration as to their manhood. Others were appreciative of information in any way, while kind of feeling, alienated by how well-receiving white YouTubers' parents and friends were, unlike those of theirs. What participants seem to often overlook is that they are the ones who specifically look for the cases where the person went through physical changes significantly. Also, people tend to watch a series of videos uploaded by one person within a short span of time, meaning you could be looking at a series of videos uploaded throughout 2 years within 2 days. So this time compression presents the physical changes more dramatic than they are. After I conducted my research, I had to ask myself a question. What is manhood? It seemed to me so many of my fellow FDM trans friends felt incomplete about their manhood. No wonder most wanted to measure up to the definition of masculinity that is governed by Western terms that already mandate that Asian men are feminine and underdeveloped and basically not attractive. And I was like, you know what, I'm hella attractive, and I had to learn what manhood means, so, I Googled it. And the first image that pops up is, manhood is not automatic. This led me to another question. If manhood is not automatic, how can young trans Koreans collectively redefine the meaning of manhood and masculinity, given the particularities of their blog communities and other Korean contexts? And although it's by no means exhaustive, my answer to this question is to meet up and talk. Redefining a term is never enough. There has to be a culture that affirms and lives the new definition of manhood and masculinity. Because South Korea is a relatively small country in comparison to China, Japan, and some other, people with determination and a bit of money can get together more often. Just like we did in last September at what I organized as T-Camp, and somehow I'm wearing the same clothes. Yeah, I just wear this every day. I look professional, and I think people should meet up as a group more often and talk about their own definition of manhood, and masculinity. I hope this kind of regular meeting provides an opportunity to build on a greater solidarity. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much. We're open now for some questions from the audience.
Yes, back.
Sometimes I heard that they still facing the difficulties and they need to bring the idea, or maybe they need to back to the community, or they need to talk about their life issues in a professional. So I'm wondering that if there are any group after the transition and they're trying to involve those people to talk about the daily life issues in Korea.
Thank you. Thank you for the question. So, is it safe to assume that your definition of after transition is after legal gender change?
Yes.
Okay. So, I don't think that there is a specific group that is dedicated to the discussion of how post-transition life is not necessarily comfortable or not necessarily equivalent of cisgender life. It's still different. And even after it's very difficult to get your gender marker changed because one has to have money, again, to go through transition. And I believe those kind of conversations are being held, but being held probably in cafe where most members have gone through some set of transition. And there are cafe members who haven't left the cafe even as they are done with their transition. So in my case, at one point I attended this conversation about the law that got passed so that trans men wouldn't have to get their bottom surgery for their legal gender marker changed. And after that, we had like a after party. There was beer, and I didn't get it. and then at that scene, people talked about things because there were some trans men in their early 50s, late 40s. Those had the opportunity to talk about their experiences, but the rest didn't have so much. But I think wherever one goes to like a group of trans population that has a variety of age groups, people still can bond over the fact that they went through certain transition steps because they're often required. Yeah.
I know that in the past there has been a lot of transphobia expressed in the lesbian community and in the gay male community. But today there's also been a lot of solidarity and even sexual interest from both lesbians and gay men in regards to F2M people. Can you talk about how the situation is in Korea?
Well, so I personally haven't really navigated the Korean queer scene, but the thing is, so unfortunately there is no online application that would enable trans people to upload their profiles and then let themselves available for whoever is interested in meeting one. If there is one, that would be often for what Korean people call lover, which is a very somehow exchangeable with the term chaser. So it's not necessarily a positive scene. And as far as I've heard some personal anecdotes from my friends who are in their early 20s or late teens, they would have to, they would first date, let's say there's a FTM identified individual who is also straight identified, because this person has a very difficult time meeting with cis identified, straight identified woman that he desires to meet. He would have to introduce himself to a lesbian woman who also thinks that he is in fact a woman identified. So there's complexity, one having to lie, one having to have sex in the meantime, one having to lie. So unfortunately there isn't so much of solidarity going on right now, I would say. But it is emerging, but as of now there's no concrete one, yeah.
You're focusing, of course, a lot on F2M.
Yeah.
Is there also a M2F community at Neighbor, and is there any overlap between the two, or is there?
I will make a very, so take it with a grain of salt, very cautiously, because I personally do not know so many, but it seems to me that FDM folks, due to the existence of cafe that is often so hyper-masculine, they would come back to their blog communities and chill there, while according to some, again, anecdotes, MTF people wouldn't so often make blogs, but rather form a cafe that's far more healthy. But then I call it healthy because it's not hyper-masculine, but then there's also hyper-feminine. But hyper-feminine often operates in a very, like, hey, you look so pretty, the makeups work really well, but if somebody posts post-surgery chest on cafe, they would start making grade your chest. Like, oh, your nipples are not looking well. Do you have sensations? And then they're like, yeah, I would rather not go to that doctor. And then this one So I in fact skipped several things because I thought it would be too shocking. Although I'm not really necessarily answering your question, so just to answer your question, I don't think, for me, it seems like FTM identified or trans-masculine identified folks gather more often in blog if they are young. And then in case of trans women or trans feminine identified folks, they would rather go to cafe. It seems to me there is also far less bullying. But speaking of bullying, I would like to talk about the fact that the manager can change names of the different ranks. I would like to give you a bit of a trigger warning. So what happened in Neighbor Cafe about 5 years ago was that the manager changed. So this is just the default setting of like the ranks, and then the manager could like add more ranks in and subtract out. But what happened was you would begin, so this is an FTM-centric cafe. You would begin as a woman, and I said it as a woman. And then as you prove your manhood, you would promote and then go up to the next level, which is masculine woman. And then once you start your hormones, then you become a man. And then you become masculine man. And then you become like a ladder man, like L-A-D, like L-E-A-T-H-E, or like ladder jacket, you know, like that's like the hyper masculine. And then once you get your legal gender change, you're a real man. And this is really, it's run by trans men. Everybody who identifies as a man, and then everybody somehow starts from the category of woman, and then when they get up to a higher rank or the highest rank, they start condescending to the lower members because they can directly see what your rank is. It says that you're a woman, and this is where also the hyper-masculine structure comes in, because if you don't behave within the rules, whether it be implicit or explicit, of a cafe, you get descended to a lower rank, meaning you no longer have an access to the information that you, which is the very reason you came here. And then if one complains, why is it so difficult to become a higher rank? Then they would say, oh, suck it up, be a man. And then they would use some other like very female derogatory terms to put down people who cannot suck it up. And this is another very, another occasion that is offline. So cafe members would often meet outside cafe, and then there's like Seoul region or Busan region or Daegu region, so it's like regional thing. And then they would have like Busan room or Dead Seoul room, so they would have their own like regular meeting. And what happened several times, again, personal anecdote, I heard from a trans friend in his late 20s. He identifies as trans man, and he told me that when he turned 22, he got invited over to like this after party, and then during that after party, which lasted really short, they went to the second after party, which is quote unquote what I call is the battle of masculinity. Or so where they went to is I can't really clearly find a term, but in Korean, for those who understand Korean, it would be rumsalon, which is like a specific form of half prostitution, half karaoke. So you walk in, it's karaoke, and then you can quote unquote order a woman for an hour. And what happened, based on what he told me, was that there were several people who have completed their legal gender change. Another several people who have completed top and bottom but haven't the legal gender change, and some hormone and top surgery, and the last group, only hormones. They wouldn't let in any people who haven't gone through anything because they're not man, based on the category. So this group, the least manly group, who have only gone through transition hormones, they were complaining, oh, I would love to get top surgery so that I could start dating, start looking for a girlfriend to date, and blah, blah, blah. And there's this one person who said, I can't date a girl without like getting, sorry, I'm just using a different voice. I can date a girl without like getting a top surgery. I'll let you see what I do. So So he, quote unquote, ordered a helper woman for an hour, and then he started touching this woman's boobs in front of everybody. And then the rest of the members had to also, quote unquote, order a woman for an hour so that they could measure up to the standard of masculinity. And as I hear these episodes repeatedly, I'm genuinely really concerned, because if I were to bridge the gap between the young trans folks of my age and the older trans folks that I also know some personally, I would have to explain what has been going on in each community very candidly. And once I tell the young folks, although I personally haven't yet, because I'm so worried, like, when they hear, like, yeah, that's how you become, quote unquote, a man, then they would follow up the same route, which then leads to the same thing, especially when there's this thing called digital life funeral. So they go through the same thing, delete their past, and then the tradition of, quote unquote, buying a woman in the karaoke repeats. It's not a healthy environment. So because there's a growing number of trans men who understand these transitions very unhealthy form of masculinity, they come back to blog. But at the same time, blog is a very individual based. There's no such space for like community discussion, or you can post your own thing on somebody else's blog. They all oftentimes turn to Anglo-centric social networking system, which, as indicated in the quote, is helpful, but there is this effective influence that, oh yeah, I can't be a man, because, again, according to Western terms, which say, oh, manhood is about like looking masculine, meaning muscular, meaning beard, and all these things, and at the same time, Asianness is always highly linked with femininity, hyperfemininity, hypersexualized, or asexualized in case of a man. And at the same time, trans men, they were, quote unquote, not born a man. They were born with the body of that of a female, so to speak. So, because Asianness combines with being born into a female bodiedness, people feel basically far less qualified to even call themselves a man when they are not as tall as 175, when they can't sing a song by, I don't know, like whoever has a low, deep voice. So that's like a really long answer, or I'm not even sure if that was the extension of my talk. Sorry.
Maybe we can take one last question.
So thank you first, because it was really interesting. When you mentioned digital funeral, how easy and how complete can these things actually be done? Because as everybody knows, even if you delete an account, if you delete an account or set the pictures to private, they're still in the net. So how are the people who have decided to do digital funeral and create a second digital persona, how are they dealing with the possibility of these things coming back around, so to speak?
That's a very interesting question, because it ties back to why younger folks prefer blog over cafe. So when one registers in a cafe and starts leaving a comment, and then let's say this person completed one's legal gender change, and in case of a cafe, even if you leave, even if you resign being a member, your record leaves there, like every single thing. So what one would usually do is to revisit every single comment one has left, and then delete every single thing, which is very time consuming. Because this is so systematic. To go up to a higher rank, you have to leave a comment. But at the same time, to resign from it, you would rather have it deleted. This is not the case for everybody, but most people do, because they're concerned. There has been some cases wherein the member kind of, let's say, hey, I would like to buy, this is illegal by the way, hey, I would like to buy 3 vials of testosterone for 30K Korean won, and then somebody says, okay, I'll send you my money over bank transfer, and then you send your money, you didn't get back anything. So because there has been numerous cases this kind of lying happened, people would rather not stay in cafe, but go to blog, which is far easier to delete because you just can delete the blog entirely. Boom. So I would say that's what's been going on. And in regards to your second part of the question, what people do is, in case of neighbor, I would have to type out that national ID, which its seventh digit indicates my sex assigned at birth. So for me, it's 2 instead of 1. So 1 is for male bodied at birth, 2 is for female bodied at birth. So for neighbor, you could either delete your blog and then delete your membership from the cafe after also deleting posts, and then delete your neighbor ID at all. And then you could sign up for another neighbor ID, because now that you have new national ID, neighbor doesn't really recognize you as a previous being. What one could also do is to go to totally different domains. So neighbor is used by more than 70% of the population in South Korea, so this is really popular. Most people's homepage is neighbor. But there's also Daum, to some other search portals, web portals, in combination with search services that also provide you with the availability for creating a blog. But because Naver has such a great system, most people go to Naver. Yeah, so they would recreate. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you very much, Kimo.